But it looks like the Pelicans are going to open their facility next Monday from what we hear today, which is, of course, the first step, and that's positive. Before we get into the Zion issues, do you think we're going to have some sort of NBA season resuming? And if so, what is it going to look like?
That's a question that everybody's asking, and I'm just sort of based on, what we've heard from Adam Silver the past couple of weeks. It seems like they're really going to do whatever they can to somehow crown a champion. I think whatever we do see, I don't think there'll be any fans at any games that we see in the NBA if they are able to continue. I think they'll probably go to one of these bubble sites that they've talked about, like Las Vegas or Orlando, and just, have all the teams there. And I don't know if they'll go straight to a playoffs or they'll try to finish out the regular season. I know if you're a Pelicans fan, you got to want them to finish that regular season. The Pelicans were 3.5 games behind the Grizzlies there and had a really favorable schedule and had a chance to sneak in and get that 8th spot. So I know they love that chance, and you'd like to see them get that opportunity, especially with how well they had been playing once they got healthy. But the NBA may just decide, okay, let's just go straight to the playoffs and take that top 8 teams in each conference that are already there. So that wouldn't go over well with the Pelicans, I'm sure. But that's probably an option as well. But I do think they'll do whatever they can to try to crown the champion.
Yeah, I suspect that's going to be the case, too. I think they're probably going to resume in some fashion in one location, if not two, and I do think they'll do what they can to crown a champion. The only blowback would be if there's another major breakout with this pandemic, or if there's suitable enough number of players that decide they just don't want to do it. And, there will be some consternation on the part of some, regardless of what the sport is. And it's interesting, Rod, from a sports perspective, I think each one has to be looked at differently. The baseball dynamic, we see what's going on in Taiwan. We see what's going on in South Korea. It's a little bit different because, by and large, you don't have a lot of close contact. You have an umpire, a catcher, and a hitter. You have a guy holding a guy on base.
Right.
But other than that, there's no real close contact with the spacing of players, and they certainly can space in the dugout. So that's a little bit of a different dynamic, isn't it?
That is. That's something that, we don't really talk about that a lot, but I do think, baseball definitely has an advantage, and, as opposed to football and basketball. These guys are touching each other basically every second of the game. They're in close contact with each other. So that's something that's going to really have to be talked about. And I think there will be some players who won't feel safe, or their wives or kids may not feel safe, and they just may not be wanting to take that risk. So, there's a lot of things that they have to think about when they, talk about resuming these sports. And, I have a feeling sometimes like maybe some of these sports are going to try to start and then realize it's a bad idea, which, I hope that's not the case, but I think that could happen in some of these cases. They'll start playing and someone will test positive, and then they'll have to realize that, okay, this wasn't the smart thing to do, and we're kind of sort of back where we are right now. So I just hope they, weigh all the pros and cons before they decide to do anything.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't know that there's a right and a wrong. I think the right thing is caution, obviously. The wrong thing isn't trying to resume at some point because people, A, want to live their lives, and B, with regard to sports, it's not just the entertainment value and the fans. There's so much money involved in this and jobs. And that the last part's the one that I focus on because it affects so many lives. And you know as well as I do, every time a game is put on at Smoothie King Center, anytime a game is put on in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, just to name a couple of places, not even to get into Tiger Stadium or anything, you're talking about so many people that rely on income from those games, directly or indirectly, not just stadium workers or people working on game days, but also restaurants, everything else imaginable. So it has such an incredible impact. But you're right. I think the caution is the most important thing here. The second part of that is when it does come back, I think we all need to pray and cross our fingers because the last thing you want to see is more of a breakout, because then the blame game will begin and people will start casting aspersions. And look, I think a lot of good people on every side of this issue, regardless of where you fall, are hoping and trying to do the right thing here. And the problem is we just don't know what's right at this point. The other sport that certainly is applicable in terms of spacing and being able to be played is soccer. And we're seeing that. Camps are opening, and those leagues are going to resume abroad here very soon because of the very nature of the sport. Again, by and large, you don't have a lot of close contact in that sport.
Yeah, I mean that's another one. I would assume tennis can play. I think I saw something
Yes.
today that PGA is going to start like in a month and start back up. So I mean I think we'll start slowly getting back to some of the things that we were accustomed to seeing. But as far as these major sports, and when I say major, I mean I think baseball, I think they will start. But as far as football and basketball, I mean those are just going to be really big question marks on if they can do it or not.
Yeah, I think those are the two that are clearly the biggest concerns, and those are the two with the biggest interest here, obviously, with major league franchises. The story regarding Duke and Zion and Adidas and Nike breaks yesterday, and you certainly have to take it at face value. It looks pretty serious. We don't know what is going to come of this. I mean, it's quite possible that this could end pretty quickly with a settlement of sorts. On the other hand, it could carry on for quite some time, could implicate people and get nasty, and it could be a distraction. I wrote a story earlier today for CrescentCitySports.com about the comparison, and I think it's a very valid one, to what happened with Reggie Bush in New Orleans. Reggie Bush was the Heisman Trophy winner, best player in college football, second overall pick in the NFL draft in 2006. He comes here amid unbelievable fanfare, and the same year the accusations came out about everything that transpired at USC. He originally denied it. Ultimately, we know what happened there. The Heisman got taken away. Sanctions were imposed. Bowl game bans, forfeiting games, scholarship bans. They took all of his memorabilia out of the school. And yet it didn't really affect his play here in New Orleans at all. He played very well in his 5 seasons and recently earned Saints Hall of Fame induction honors. Zion Williamson, best player in college basketball, won the Naismith last year. Terrific young man, great character, maturity beyond his age. But you got to wonder about the distraction and whether or not it's going to impact him, and if so, to what degree. What do you make of this at this point?
It's an unfortunate situation, I guess, when you look at it, especially when, I mean, at the time, I mean, Zion's only 19 now. When some of these allegations came out about him maybe receiving, or maybe not even him, but his parents or whoever receiving benefits. I mean, Zion was 17 at the time. So, I mean, you hate for a kid like that to even be involved in that, because he could very well not have even known any of this was going on if it if it actually did happen. So, that's the unfortunate side of it. And I think Zion's, he's a pretty mature guy, and I don't think it will affect his play on the court at all. And I just sort of hate to see somebody so young get his name even, just having to even deal with that type of distraction right now. But, it's a pretty interesting case. I mean, he originally signed with this marketing firm, Prime Sports Marketing, right out of as soon as he declared for the draft, and they were going to handle all of his endorsements and all that, and he ended up changing his mind basically, and ended up signing with CAA, and they ended up being his, handling his marketing and his being his agent, and I think some of this is them, the original people he signed with, they didn't like that decision, obviously, because that's a lot of money they didn't get, because they didn't get, this high-profile guy. So now they're trying to fight it legally so they can get compensated for what they had and no longer have. So it's going to be really interesting. I think one of the parts about the case that sort of stands out is I guess the question of when they, when Prime Sports actually first approached Zion. And I mean, there are some reports that said that could have been as early as January of his season at Duke, which would have been, while he was still playing, and when they shouldn't have been even making contact with him. So if they made that agreement then, it sort of changes everything, because at that point they basically violated NCAA rules, and it's just a big mess, and I don't know how it's going to end up.
Sure. No, I'm with you. Rod Walker with us from NOLA.com, The Advocate, 260-1061. And we're seeing a sea change when it comes to college basketball. Louisville has gotten notification most recently, and something's going to happen there since that dates back to Pitino. Arizona, we know what's happened there in that basketball program. Kansas was hit very, very hard recently with some strong allegations, which they deny, but it's clear they're going after them in a huge way. The recordings of Will Wade, and nothing's happened with that to this point, and maybe it won't. We'll see. Now we get the most. I mean, I want to say this the right way. I'm not being critical at all when I say this because you can't help but admire Mike Krzyzewski and what he's done over all these years. But Duke would be considered what, the squeaky clean, pristine program, right? And,
yeah, I mean that's sort of what you hear when you think of Duke. But I mean, you look at the programs that you just named, and you named Louisville, you named Kansas, and now we're talking Duke. I mean, those are, three of the premier programs in the country, and it definitely. I know for the NCAA, and you need to treat everybody fairly, and that's the thing. So I mean, if Duke did it, you have to punish Duke, and that's something the NCAA is going to have to do. And I know Duke's one of their big money makers, and you may not want to hold them accountable, but I mean, you have to if you want to. You want to be a fair organization, and I mean that's something that the NCAA often gets criticized about is how they, seem to treat some teams differently than they treat others. So, if there is something to this, they need to do their job of their due diligence in checking into it.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the link to the shoe companies, that's nothing new. That's been going on forever. That's that's an age-old story at this point.
Right. I mean, according to this stuff with Zion, I mean, they're saying that, he may have got some inducements from both Nike and Adidas, so all of that, plays a part in how this is going to work out. And, that like you said, shoe companies have been steering players to programs and allegedly, I guess I should say, for forever. And it's something the NCAA needs to get a hold of it at some point if they want to stop it, because it's not going to get better unless they, put their foot down and say, okay, this has to stop.
I don't know what the answer is. Now we're getting the more than murmurs where there's smoke, there's fire about compensating athletes on the college level in some capacity, whether it's merchandising or beyond. I think it's going to happen, whether you agree with it or not. So there's that. And then there's also the dynamic in basketball, which has popped up most recently, where prime prospects, the top-of-the-line guys coming out of high school, are now choosing to go to the G League rather than go to college. Is this a trend in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a trend. I think especially these guys they're going to be one-and-done guys in a way. I mean, if you can get paid, and I know college basketball has been the traditional thing to do, but if you can get paid and go to a G League for 1 year, not have to go to class, because most of these guys probably aren't going to ever, they probably aren't going to stay in school for 4 years and get a degree in a way. I think those guys this is the route they're going to take. And I mean, if you got a chance to make some money, and a lot of these players don't come from, families with a lot of money. I mean, this is a chance for them to make some money for their family and do it for 1 year and then go to the NBA to make bigger money. I think that's going to be what a lot of guys are going to start doing, especially these obvious first round guys. I mean, I think it gets a little dicey when you get these guys who are probably on the border who are taking that risk. I mean, they should probably, go to school and, and try to take the more traditional route. But I definitely I understand why some guys would do it.
Few minutes with Rod Walker left. Saints, I pretty much like everything they've done, and I'm, and again, could be right, could be wrong, but I like what they did in the draft. I think they ended up with players that are not only going to contribute, but in the case of two, start, and the third, the tight end, will probably play pretty early on. And then with regard to free agency, certainly like what they did with Malcolm Jenkins and love what they did with Emmanuel Sanders. You hate to see Warford go, but you can understand why, and there's a good move financially. They're banking on Ruiz being that guy, and they like McCoy, and that's understandable. And then, of course, Jameis Winston was a no-brainer for the price they got him at. That was a tremendous acquisition, given the money they're paying out, and the blueprint's already there with what happened with Teddy Bridgewater. So, and then having no offseason, the common trend of thought is that it will benefit a team like the Saints that has continuity, and I certainly buy into that. And I also like the fact that their early schedule isn't very tough. It's very bottom-heavy, to say the least. But I think all those things are going to contribute to this team getting off to a fast start, barring injury.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ken. I think this is that one season when, if there's ever a season that the Saints need to make sure it gets played, it's this one. I mean, we don't need this season to get interrupted or anything, because I just think the pieces are there, the schedule's lined up for them. They fill the few holes that this team had, and this is a team that didn't have many. Linebacker was maybe one, and getting that other receiver, which, you talked about Emmanuel Sanders. They filled the holes they had. They have a schedule that really, shapes up well for them, especially on the front end. They can get out to a fast start, and I just think everything's in place for this team. They just got to hope this team can get 16 games in and we can play this season, because I think this is the year, and I think, and I've been saying this for the past couple of years that, that window's closing, but I think on this team that window has not closed yet, but I do think this is the year. I mean, I don't if they don't get it done now, I'm probably going I'll probably be one of the ones who shut the window on this team, because I would just think, it's just not in the cards if they can't get it done this year. But they got some really good young pieces. They have an offensive line now that, you got to, if Ruiz comes in and is able to play like Sean Payton thinks he'll be able to contribute, I mean, when you can get you a young offensive lineman playing on a rookie salary as opposed to that $7 million that Larry Warford was hitting hitting the salary cap for, I think that's a steal for this team to be able to get a young guy like that who can come in and play right away.
No doubt. And their oldest starter would be Armstead at 29, so they'd have a chance to have 5 guys together for at least, say, 3 years, which is pretty substantial. And that's how they've built this team from the inside out. 3 first-round picks on that offensive line, 3 first-round picks on that defensive line, a second-round pick in Armstead, a second-round pick in McCoy, a third-round pick in Hendrickson. Again, this is how they built it. Even on Yamato, 4th-round pick. So they built from the inside out, and it's really worked for them. So we shouldn't have been surprised when they went for Ruiz in the first round.
No, we shouldn't have been. I mean, and I'll admit I was one of the ones who was. I just didn't.
Me too.
I just wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't really thinking that. I didn't know that they were, going in a different direction with Warford, but they obviously, knew that and had a plan, and that frees up some money. I mean, because they're about to have to start paying some of these guys who were drafted a few years ago, like, Alvin Kamara and Marshawn Lattimore and Ramczyk and DeMario was a free agent, but I mean, it'll be time for them to, pay him again here soon. So I mean, they're gonna need money. So I think this is the getting rid of Warford was a really good move for this team. And again, I mean, they're filling a void with a cheaper price, and that's something that'll help this team in the long run.